Chaos is that which existed before time, when the words of a story lose their meaning, when actions cease to have purpose. Know that only faith can protect you from this peril, here in the Garden of Worlds.
Welcome to the Garden of Worlds? Yes, this does feel like home. I've visited plenty of castles, forts, stately homes throughout the United Kingdom in my time. I'd say that might be the first time someone has referred to someone else by name in a message. I'm not that desperate. All I want to do is show off a feature. I resolve to reach the end of the solution and then go back to this and agree. Just letting some of the music sink in. It is wonderful to have a bit of tune and variety, a bit of string plucking. After Egypt's predilection for long, low, drawn-out wind instruments. Chekhov's hole in the wall there. I've been turning the phrase Garden of Worlds around in my head for a couple minutes now. I think that Elohim thinks that he has created an updated version of the Garden of Eden. As in, it's not just an allegory with the tower as the tree, but it's been made intentionally to mirror it. All of this is supposed to be somewhere we can live in perpetual paradise, without further want and in constant communion with our Creator. It's improved though, because there are more places to go to, more things to see. But there's less stuff to interact with, and it's a journey. Once we're done, we're done. Ah yes, I'm going to be using this alternate way of interacting with the connectors that retains all the things it was pointing at before. I'm going to use that a lot from now on. I initially wasn't going to, in case it circumvented some puzzles, but judging by this room there'll be plenty of things to point at coming up, so this is just expediency. And for those with an aversion to clicking sounds, my voice notwithstanding. I've decided this is pretty much my favourite type of puzzle in the game, trying to prevent two lasers from colliding. It could definitely outstay its welcome, but slight variations in geometry make all the difference, and it's always really clear what you're supposed to be doing. It looks like my problem here is not leveraging these windows, and it's made harder by having the area back there behind a barrier, so once you've done the setup you can't readjust later on. So Dog has gone from devil's advocate, pointing out all the flaws for the benefit of no one but himself, to someone who finds himself in an unpleasant situation but gets on with it out of nothing better to do, to their current state where they've had a chat with the devil, found that he's got some pretty decent points to make, has internalised all the pessimism and pretty much given up. I'm not sure what he's supposed to do if he's not willing to play along, But in any case, Samsara comes along and says, if you do not become invested in finding a solution, you will be free. Which is a completely different stance. Dog is extremely down to earth, reacting to each new location and each obstacle as it occurs, in the negative, but still. Whereas Samsara is evangelizing the notion of not solving all of these puzzles. And I don't know what they would suggest to do instead. There aren't many alternatives here. My theory then is that Samsara is trying to reach the top first, and is afraid that they won't be able to, by the sheer force of all these robots running around, any of which could get there before them. This is an excellent foil to the Shepherd, who is all about being one of the links in the chain, and if you just so happen to be the final link, well, good for you. Dog may well be trying to do the same as Samsara, in which case it's nice to see a contrast. One of them is whinging about there not being a solution, and the other's going for a much more subtle, elevated manipulation. That message actually prompted me to go for a wander through the woods around this puzzle before tackling it straight away. I really didn't think the @ sign would be a persistent character. The exact same version was the very first message we saw. Just after getting past the first puzzle, they said, "I don't know where I am, but there is something beautiful about this place. I will explore and see what I can discover." And they haven't changed very much. Excuse me. The @ sign has maintained its general amicability, taking the time to look around and say, yes, this is quite nice, but still progressing really quite far through the game, appreciating the fact that their life does have mysteries to it that they need to unearth. But there's plenty of messages around talking about the big picture. It's nice to see some still focused on the minutiae. So that's something interesting. It still sounds like stammering madness, but there is a progression in the thought process of I'm not repeating that name again. They're not just saying, I want out of someone else's reality, but they want their own. I don't really know how far to interpret that. I'd think that most people, given the chance to maintain and control their own universe, would not take the offer. That's a bit too much like hard work. Who would want to be such a control freak? The more likely interpretation is that they would prefer an existence not so blatantly controlled. Voices in the sky, things glitching back and forth. Something a bit more real, you know? I think I've sussed that star puzzle as soon as I find a jammer, so let's move on to the logs. Firstly, we have the Apocrypha of St. Eidwald. An Apocrypha is a biblical text not considered canon due to unknown authorship, or that's otherwise spurious. Yeah, there's a glitchy square around here. I have no idea how I didn't spot it at the time. I have no idea how I didn't step on it at the time. I'll show it off in a future video. So firstly, I'm fairly sure this text is original to the game. I can't find a reference to Saint Eidwald. There's a 8th century king, that's about it. And it's an account from the eponymous Eidwald in a vision given to him by the Archangel Uriel, where 7 black clouds representing the 7 plagues come down to the land, and then the 7 archangels I was speaking about last time. Oh yes, I completely forgot to ask for help in the last puzzle, so I made absolutely sure I would this time. So yes, the 7 archangels, Uriel included, all come down on their chariots of light and blot out the clouds. And then Uriel's all like, these plagues weren't caused by Elohim, they were the cost of sin. Do you reckon God should wipe out almost all life on Earth, again, just because of what you did? So I guess he's saying, Noah's flood, that was your second chance, and that's all you get. If you want to wipe yourselves out and start from scratch again, you're going to have to do it by your own hands. So maybe the virus that's wiped out humanity is man-made, part of some sort of biological warfare, and already I'm reading too much into this. On the puzzle front, I seem to have a box and absolutely nowhere to put it, nothing to use it with, and I'm kinda stumped at this point. My thought then is, wow, maybe since this is the final zone, the puzzles might insist on interactions between them, not just for stars, but for the basic sigils themselves. This doesn't pan out, so yeah, the hidden text on that log file is, "The lion and wolf shall cease," which is a bit more of the marriage of heaven and hell. The only reason it's mentioned, I think, is because this bit talks about clouds. It's from a section entitled A Song of Liberty, and seems to be about the expansion of Rome, where it's described as a fiery figure who retreats, spurning the clouds written with curses, stamps the stony law to dust, loosing the eternal horses from the dens of night, crying, "Empire is no more, and now the lion and wolf shall cease," which refers to them stopping their respective roaring and howling, something that should otherwise be eternal. Don't worry, even if I had asked for assistance at this point, it wouldn't have gotten me anywhere. And 2 times 2 makes 4. The second log file is part of Nadia Sarabi's journal, and it's really nice and humanizing, and that's all it really is for. Everything is now dark and quiet. The stars are visible, light pollution's way down apparently. There's water high above, which allows you to speculate as to the location of this facility. That's quite interesting actually. I'd love to believe that they were in a secret cave beneath a waterfall, and my only other thought is that they're in some sort of rapture-like underwater city. Maybe they're just near a waterfall, and it seems like an odd detail to point out if that's purely the case. Or maybe electricity is inefficient and therefore they're near some sort of hydroelectricity station, or there are turbines overhead. Could be all sorts. Need not necessarily indicate something lair-like. This seems like it could be my objective in order to get around that fan. Requires a few too many components to get it unblocked and powered though. So Nadia goes on to talk about Alexandra recording time capsule messages, Arcady uploading to the archive, Omar sleeping on a couch. She spends some time thinking about how it seems bizarre that all of this could ever end, and then finishes off by saying, "I wonder if there will be quiet places in the simulation, places to rest without thinking about the future. I hope so. Everyone deserves some moments of peace." Yeah, I did say I didn't have enough components to do this. So Nadia, I suppose, I could be cynical and say that no one would really think like this, but it sounds like someone who really does consider what we are to be a valid sentience, more than just fit for purpose, but filled with other needs and capacity for appreciation. And she's right. This is where I think the length of the game might not have been because that's what they planned and they made lots of puzzles, but because it's supposed to give a feel for being trapped in a simulation that you need to escape from. And I'm sure in reality it was a bit of both, but it's nice how it feeds into the story. And as far as the story is concerned, it's of massive consequence that the locations we visit are as nice as they are. If we're being made to be fit for existence in the world, it's absolutely crucial that we like the world when we get there, and we haven't simply been trained to solve puzzles, of which there are relatively few of this nature in the real world. It feeds into what I said right at the start of this series, pretty much. Crow Team have created a concept here where everything that the player sees in the game fuels that concept, rather than something to be glossed over, like red mist in a shooter game or numbers appearing above people's heads. I am seriously deep in thought right now. The only difficult part about the end of this puzzle is, again, all of the receivers. I only have one connector, remember, so ultimately I'm going to have to use it to power the fan. But you see all these gates, you see that you could potentially open 2 red ones at the same time, and it clouds your judgment a bit. The more perspectives you can get, the better, even if it's only to rule out certain areas as being without use. It's too early to say for certain, but the puzzles so far have been an excellent mix of all of the components coming together without being too spread out and compartmentalized, which was something that cropped up time and time again in Egypt. I suppose I was really aware of my propensity for forging ahead without checking all of the corners first. I solved the puzzle from this point with a relatively strong amount of confidence though. I guess the only wisdom I'd really impart from all this is that you don't have to open all the doors at once. If you open the door ahead of you, feel free to shut the one behind you. If you get some new friends, ditch the old ones. If you make some nice new contacts, I'll just burn those old bridges. Or maybe the allegory is, if you've progressed yourself to a particular point, you should try to bring someone else there with you. They may help you progress even further. Just for the record, I am talking an impressive amount of nonsense here. Oh, and also, don't forget to ask for help after you've already solved the problem, so you get to rub your prowess in their stupid, generous face. That's your lot. Use an axe to break down a wall to find 5 sigil puzzles ranging from hard to excruciating. To get one of only 3 help messages in a game with over 100 puzzles. That equates to 3 words of advice that may not have helped you with the problem you were suffering from. I appreciate the effort they must have gone to provide a hint for every single one of these puzzles, but I can still point out that it's hilariously misplaced. I'm not sure what I was doing here, perhaps providing a dramatic reenactment of me solving what actually puzzled me about this room. Moving on, since I'm at the halfway point sigil-wise, I decided to check out that terminal I saw by the water. I've potted off long enough, it's time to check out that castle. The third text log is simply titled Hope. It's from who knows to who knows who else. And it says the internet's been disappearing unpredictably, and they're going to try and get to whoever they're heading for. They might not make it, but it should be crossable in time, assuming the corrupted doesn't kick in before corrupted. Of course I've got to walk around the whole thing first. So that compounds the inference that people know when they're going to die, and the virus itself is quite trackable. The thing that kicks in, it can't be death. Death doesn't kick in. It could be motor neuron failure, tissue degeneration, uncontrollable hiccuping. It's impossible to say, but there's clearly some interim phase before death. Just admiring the so-called beauty. Of course, I already found the most beautiful spot quite a few episodes ago, but that isn't to the exclusion of all else. At Symbol is having an absolute field day, and again the shepherd is throwing in his slightly unwarranted bigger picture perspective. So after everything I said about not reading too much into the interactions with these components, there's no use reading in whether you're selfishly burning bridges or selflessly giving others the same opportunities you've had. The hidden text of the text log then gives us the phrase heaven in hell's despair, which is a line from Blake's The Clod and the Pebble, which is all about selfish and unselfish love. So however serendipitous, I'll of course bow my head to a game that manages to bring up something that I myself was thinking about just moments before. Ah, fence, I know your weakness. The poem's quite short, so while I'm wandering around, it's worth reading out. Love seeketh not itself to please, nor for itself hath any care, but for another gives its ease, and builds a heaven in hell's despair. So sung a little clod of clay, trodden with the cattle's feet, but a pebble of the brook warbled out these meters meet. Love seeketh only self to please, to bind another to its delight, joys in another's loss of ease, and builds a hell in heaven's despite. So the little clod of clay is all about innocently giving oneself for the sake of love, and the pebble is about binding someone to you for your own ends. Two perspectives on the same subject, and here the subject is escaping the simulation. Of the programs, there are certainly some that have remained soft, and others that have turned hard in the process. And whether that is through greater experience, well, the hardest of them all, samsara, was destroyed, yet retained their memories. The conclusion then, as with most differences in perspective, is to appreciate another perspective without necessarily sharing it. I personally believe I'll always remain a clod of clay at heart. With all the pieces at my disposal, all that's left to do is assemble them correctly. I'm pretty sure I've done this part of the puzzle before. The room is rather grandiosely titled Multiply Impossible Ascension, which, while relevant to the solution, sounds more like a cryptic crossword clue. MIA, missing in action, but the setting here is England, so the equivalent phrase is absent without leave, or AWOL. AWOL, airborne with overseer laser, and there you have the solution. Pretty simple. The fourth text log is titled Against Survival, and is really valuable, especially from our perspective. That is, the subject of the argument reading about it long after the conclusion. It's a letter from one Cellist Jensen to Alexandra, arguing for cancellation of the Extended Life project. Cheers, Barakiel. I'm so glad I unentombed you. Chellis's counter-argument to this project is a moral one. What we are is pale imitations of humanity, created to serve their purposes, put in a prison, and forced to reenact their sordid history. Hang on, Ouroboros here. talking with its tail in its mouth.
Sometimes I think about the Middle Ages, about what it must have been like to live in the ruins of a great civilization, to know that so much has been lost. But then I remind myself that while the West sank into darkness, others picked up the pieces. That civilization always survived because the great insights of philosophy and science are not bound to any one culture or people. They belong to all of us, and one day they'll belong to you.
The timing there is fairly perfect. So Chalice is saying that Alexandra's view of what's valuable is rooted in the dogma of Western civilization. Romantic historicism, which labelled the past as inherently important, was a strong European concept. Eastern cultures are focused more on historical cycles, but with more recent attempts to cement their identities, not quite willing to concede that. Alexandra's comeback to that is rooted in the audio message we just heard. What the EL project is doing is maintaining all the philosophy and science that was built up over time, which is all a part and can't really be separated from the historical context. And since these things aren't unique to any one culture, the question then is, do we maintain all of history across all cultures because it's what we want to do? Or do we destroy it, just in case it's what other cultures would have done? And so she's erring on the side of maintaining it. And maybe if she'd seen amongst the programs the ones who've felt trapped, the ones who've gone a bit crazy, I'm sure she'd feel remorse. But it's given us a chance. And without getting into a pro-life debate or something, if bringing life into the world is so terrible, why do we condone having babies? In any event, role-playing a bit, if Alexandra had heeded Chalice's words and called the whole thing off, then the decision would be made to end the life of me, a sentient creature, without any particular physical discomforts, with no dependencies on anyone else's life, who the creators wanted to bring into existence. Yeah, I'd say she made the right call. But of course, then again, it's not just me. There are multiple other AIs and programs in this system. But if we take it as read that only one of us can make it out of this simulation, then is my survival worth the destruction of everyone else's? Ooh, an excellent twist would be if I didn't make it out and someone else got there first. Well, I say all that, but this setup here wouldn't be out of place in a Saw film. Including the panic desperation followed swiftly by annihilation. Phew, right. So that argument swiftly turns into, is it morally right to impose endless suffering on one being to alleviate the suffering of millions of others? To which my answer is, that's entirely theoretical, come back to me when I have to actually make that decision myself. For now, erring on the side of knowledge, survival, all of the above. Almost there with this. I'd hesitate to call it a puzzle. It's more following a linear path and doing what needs to be done, dodging what needs to be dodged. And then when it does branch, realizing you took the wrong branch and you need to go backtrack. The fifth article, Human Evolution, is an extract from Samuel Butler's 1872 novel Erewhon. 3 of its chapters are entitled The Book of the Machines, and this section talks about how machines could reproduce like living organisms. Ahead of its time, you might say, Butler says that humans spend a huge amount of time making machines better and better, and they've already succeeded in affecting much that at one time appeared impossible, and there may be no limits if they're allowed to descend with modification from generation to generation, and if we're allowed to cut out some proportion of the useless backtracking. Again, I have to point out what a great job this game does in approaching concepts from many different angles, using each individual hub not only as a focal point, but as a stepping stone. Oh, wrong turning. Butler finishes up by saying, "It must always be remembered that man's body is what it is through having been moulded into its present shape by the chances and changes of many millions of years. Fair enough. But that his organization never advanced with anything like the rapidity with which that of the machines is advancing. So if machines are so much better at this whole organizing thing mankind has been trying to do, if you've got the opportunity, why not pass the baton over to them? And that's a point in Alexandra's favour, I feel. Just finding that turret I saw outside of this puzzle. Before I head for the star, I thought I'd break it up by seeing what Milton wants. This conversation irked me quite a lot. The predefined choices have been a sticking point throughout the game, but here they were really egregious. So when I said what's best for me, I meant as soon as I got out. I have to continue surviving since I got that far. I thought there weren't any humans. Why would what's best for me be to destroy them? Neither of these answers are anything close to what I want to say. And I feel that a misunderstanding has already occurred, and my lunatic robot fingers won't allow me to correct it. So at the risk of going back on myself while not sounding like a lunatic, this one's slightly easier, even if it doesn't address me as the player of this game. What the heck? I thought this was my moral framework. Why am I suddenly arguing for universal morality? Looking back, I should have chosen the fourth option, but while I'm here, why not throw myself into a trap? I think the problem here is that the question is too grand and nuanced to be approached successfully in this framework. Again, should have said I'm not in the position. I do believe things should be equal. I also believe it's impossible to achieve in our current social structure. I never said I'd equalise everyone's wealth. And who are these wealthy people? I'm just a robot in a simulation, I've got no concept of that. And then the infinite loop just kind of compounds this whole situation, until I end up choosing things just to be incendiary. If you're going to let me have a magical world, let me have a magical world where everyone is super nice as well. And we're back where we were, and now I'm just going through the options. Welfare handouts. Let's tally up the lazy people along with the elderly and disabled. Start with equality, then work out the fringe cases. Equality is too important to focus on the caveats. I think that's what I want to say. We are all equal because we are. And ultimately I just want out of this conversation. I went to this room because I forgot where the window was. So, what was all that about? I'll admit, when I played through that and made the choices I did, it shook me. Arguing with people is really, really, really hard, and that is a fairly accurate representation of arguing with someone who is willing to contradict you at every possible turn. After playing through this episode, I kinda needed to sit around for a bit and remember that. It's absolutely fantastic to have your viewpoints questioned, just not in such an acerbic way. And especially when you're not able, or in this case not allowed, to put into words what it is that's going through your head. But through all this, remember, this is the snake. This is arguing with the devil, which was the intention of the writer, as I said so back in episode 1. So in the end, the fact that I feel undermined is probably a good sign. Means I probably do have a decent moral compass. Anyway, deep breath while I do the steps necessary to get this star. Let's look at the final log file, which is a quote from an article by Albert Einstein, in which he discusses with an intelligent and well-disposed man the threat of another war, and the man says, "Why are you so deeply opposed to the disappearance of the human race?" And in Einstein's view, this is a relatively recent viewpoint to have. An expression of painful solitude and isolation, a fashionable self-hatred that comes from seeing the progression of the human race and not seeing your place within it. The quote doesn't go into detail on Einstein's opinions of why this may occur. It could be a post-war mentality after seeing so much evil and destruction. But I think it's more that the man he's talking to is a learned man whose ongoing discussions with a circle of co-thinkers involves aggregating knowledge without directly contributing themselves. And since no one particularly depends on them, and since they can't see who they are dependent upon, they've ended up with a what's it all for mentality. If they could do some work and get thanked as a result, if they were part of an internally reliant community, maybe they wouldn't have such casual disregard for humanity. It's like a 21-year-old who finishes university then contemplates suicide, faced with the terrifying reality and expectations of the real world. Except instead they've gotten a job in which they're paid to think, in which case the thought still remains but there's no impetus to actually carry it out. And the opinions just get more and more set in stone until that's just the way it is. As Einstein says, "Nothing seems more important to me than that we reassert the value of humanity. Despite our flaws, we must not stop celebrating the beauty of human life and human achievement." The hidden text of that file reads survival, by the way, just echoing all the other sentiments found throughout the hub. And now this is sounding more earnest than I feel, so next time, inching our way further up the tower.